name is Stanley, and I'm a rising sophomore studying at Carnegie Mellon University. Today, I'm going to be putting your mind to the test. Now, before we get started, I want to give a big thank you to Carnegie Mellon's Gelfand Center. CMU's Gelfand Center is an organization that works with both professors and college students to bring educational resources like this to students like you. After watching this module, if you enjoyed what you learned, you can go to www.cmu.edu/Gelfand to learn about more cool topics like this. There on the website, you can go over to the Free Educational Resources tab to find countless other ways to learn without having to pay a single cent. Now, let's get started. I'm about to give you a little test, but don't worry, this test isn't graded or anything. Now, I want you to think really hard to the first day of elementary school, and I want you to tell me the color of the shirt that you wore that day. Can you tell me? Chances are you probably can, but why is that? That day when you put on your shirt, you obviously looked at it, but why can't you remember what color it is? Let's try something else. I'm going to read you a sequence of letters, and I want you to memorize them as best as you can. Are you ready? Here we go. Q, T, O, J, F, S, N, E, W, K. Can you repeat them back to me? Here's another one. Are you ready? W, A, S, H, I, N, G, T, O, N. Can you repeat that back to me? This time you probably can. And more than that, you probably realize that it spells the word Washington. How come both this time and last time I gave you 10 letters, but this time you can memorize it when last time you couldn't? That was just a sneak peek about what you're going to learn about today. In this module, I'm going to be covering 3 key topics: perception, which is how we experience the world; attention, what we focus our senses on; and memory, what we remember about the world around us. You probably know this already, but you as a human being have 5 basic senses: the sense of touch, sight, hearing, smell, and taste. Of the 5 senses, the one that I personally think is the most interesting is the sense of sight. Our sense of sight isn't just as simple as opening your eyes and seeing what's there. In fact, there's a lot that goes on. When our eyes are open, the visual information from the outside world is taken in through our eyes as light. After that, the information is sent up to our brain where it's processed. Only after processing that information can we generate a mental image of what we see in front of us. Processing visual information in the brain is a very complicated process. In fact, sometimes our brain does all sorts of crazy things with the information that we bring up there. Let's look at some optical illusions to see how. Let's take a look at our first optical illusion. What do you notice about the size of the orange circle on the left compared to the size of the orange circle on the right? On first glance, it may seem like the orange circle on the right is bigger than the one on the left. But let's see if that's really the case. Right now, I'm going to use my lasso tool to select the left orange circle. And now I'm going to drag it right on top of the one on the right. And as you can see, it's actually the exact same size. The reason for this is because the orange circle on the left is surrounded by large objects, making it appear small, while the one on the right is surrounded by small objects, which makes it seem large. Take a look at this one. It might be pretty obvious that the square labeled A is a lot darker than the one labeled B. But let's erase everything else just to make sure. I'm going to erase everything other than the squares labeled A and B, and to make sure, I might go slightly inside the two boxes. And if you can see, the two squares are exactly the same color. Now I'm going to go back to the original image, and this time I want you to explain to me, why did A appear darker than B in the first place? You can pause the video here if you want more time to think. Here's another two. What do you see? For the one on the left, your eyes probably make out a triangle that looks like this, when in reality, it's not even there. For the one on the right, your eyes can probably make out the shape of a cube that looks like this. But this one actually isn't there either. So how come we can see them? This is because sometimes our brain actually infers information, and when it expects something to be there but it's actually not, sometimes it fills in the missing information, and that's why we end up seeing them. So for our last optical illusion, we're going to be looking at this picture. So right now I want you to tell me what you see in this picture. If you said duck, you are absolutely correct, and if you said rabbit, you are also absolutely correct. So if you can't see either of them, then the V-shaped at the top, it can be seen as the duck's beaks, or it can be seen as the rabbit's ears. So how come we can see two things out of the same image? Well, the human brain is very complex, so depending on past experiences and your current state of mind, different people can see different things. So let's say, for example, maybe this morning you decided to go on a walk and you saw a bunch of rabbits. Maybe because of that, your brain is more tuned to see a rabbit than a duck. So we just finished looking at some optical illusions, and basically now it's your turn to basically make your own sort of project that is also an optical illusion. So basically what I want you to do, the instructions are on one of the sheets of your handouts called Crafting in Multiple Perspectives, but otherwise I'll explain it to you. Basically, I want you to basically make something that can be viewed as two or more different things. So if you remember, the optical illusion with the duck and the rabbit that we just saw, that is a good example. But instead of just a picture, I want you to be using something that can be made into a 3D shape. So right now, I found some Play-Doh in my house. So this is just some two old cans of Play-Doh. I suggest that you use something like this. So you can also use Play-Doh if you have that in your house, or you can use stuff like Model Magic or some other type of clay. These two balls are sort of really old, so it's a little dry, so it might take a while to put them into shape. But basically, I'm going to be making the duck and rabbit illusion out of these two balls. For you, I want you to basically think of your own idea. Like, you basically can come up with two different objects and somehow combine them and make them into one thing. So now I'm just gonna get started into making the duck and rabbit thing. I'm just gonna use this orange one to make the head and then use the red one to make the ears.
So, this is my final project. My Play-Doh's like super old, so it's sort of hard to stick, so I'll just hold it. So, I tried my best to make a thing that looks like both a duck and a rabbit. It's really bad. I sort of spent a short time on it so that you can start making your own. But for yours, I want you to make something a lot better than this. So you can use more colors, you can put in more details, like you can use your hands to basically shape the design a little better than mine. So right now you can pause the video, and after you're done making your project, you can come back here and unpause. So I hope your project ended up a lot better than mine. So right now what I want you to do is basically take your project and go around your house and show it to some people. But the thing is, I don't want you to tell them what it is at first. You can show it to them and ask them, what do you think this is? And after they say something, uh, whatever your project is supposed to be, like the two or more things, you can ask them like, do you see the other thing? So if I show someone my project and they said it's a duck, I can be like, can you see that there's a rabbit in this project too? And see if they can actually see. For this part, we're going to be looking at two online videos released by researchers. For the first video, you can visit tinyurl.com slash part3 video 1. You can pause the video right now, watch the video, and then come back and unpause. When the word attention is brought up, you're probably thinking of in class when you're not looking at the board and your teacher asks you to pay attention. But that's not always the case. In the video you just watched, even though the gorilla was in your field of sight and you were looking at the entire screen, you didn't notice it. To be more concise, we learned from this video that attention is selective and limited. What that means is, if there's only one object that you're focusing on, that's probably pretty easy to keep track of. But let's say there starts to be more, and more, and more. If there are a lot of objects and things to focus on, you have to specifically select which ones to pay attention to. More than that, since your attention is limited, that means that you can't always focus on everything, and only the ones that you select to pay attention to are the ones that you can keep track of. When you're selectively paying attention to only some objects but not the others, even if the other objects are in your line of sight, you don't actually see them. This is what we call inattentional blindness. Because we don't pay attention to those objects, we actually are blind to them. For our next video, you're going to visit tinyurl.com slash part3 video 2. Again, you can pause the video right here, go watch it, and then come back and unpause. In that video, you learned about change blindness. But what's more interesting is that after you watched the first video and missed the gorilla, you were probably really paying close attention this time to make sure you weren't missing anything. But even so, you probably missed almost all the changes that happened in the video. What this comes to show is, even if you try to pay attention to every single little thing, you can't. That's because attention is limited. Next time you're in class and watching the board or screen, if you think that just because you're looking at the board or screen means that you're taking everything in, think again. Just because you're watching, you still need to be actively engaged and pay very close attention in order to absorb all the information. Otherwise, you're basically just daydreaming. So in a while, we're going to begin to learn about the human memory, and we're going to learn about things like how the relationship between words can help us memorize them better, and how sometimes we're going to end up with false memories. But right now, I'm gonna have you play a little game online to basically test how good your memory is. So if you watch my cursor, here is the URL for this game. You can pause the video right now and basically go to this website on another browser. And when you're loaded into that website, you can come back to the video and unpause, and I will basically explain how this game works. So when you're ready to go, you can basically see that this is the home screen of the website when you load in. So essentially, this is a game where you have to memorize a face as best as you can. And to basically get the face that you have to memorize, you can click on the start button, and then the website's basically going to start shuffling around the parts of the face. I think there's around 9 or 10. And basically, each part of the face is going to be randomly generated. So when you feel like you're done shuffling, you can just click the play button and it's going to stop on a random face. So basically, you have unlimited time to memorize this face. I wouldn't recommend spending too long on it, but you can basically spend as much time as you feel is necessary. And when you're confident that you know the face, you can click this ready button and begin the test. Right now, I'm not going to try to memorize it because I want to basically finish explaining the rules so that you can do it on your own. But I'm just going to click ready right now. And you can see the face goes away. And down here, you see these 10 columns, and each one has 1, 2, 3 underneath. So basically, the 1, 2, 3 corresponds to different types of the same part. So basically, you're going to go through and you're going to basically pick the ones that uh, you think were the matching ones to the face that you just memorized. And when you feel like you got it right, you can click OK. Like, of course, right now I'm just clicking random ones because I didn't memorize the face. But once you click OK, you can see it tells you how many you got right. So out of 10, I got 5, which is OK. And if you want to check with the original, you can click see original and swap back and forth to see which ones were different. And since I'm going to have you play this game multiple times, you can click new game to go back, click new game and then OK to go back to the original screen and click start again to start shuffling. So I want you to take out this sheet of your handouts right now. And like I said, I want you to basically play the face game 5 times and record your scores. If you get really bored of the game before 5 times, you can basically stop after 3 or 4, I guess. And other than that, I also want you to find someone else nearby. It could be a family member, your parents, your siblings, or it could be a friend who's over at your house. And you can ask them to play the game a few times too. You can either basically have them watch the rules that I explain, or you can explain the rules to them yourself. You can pause the video right here and resume after you have all your scores filled out. So now that you're done, I basically have some questions I want you to think about. I don't have these anywhere on your handout because I don't want you to write them down. I just basically want you to brainstorm a little bit. So first off, if you just look at your own scores, I want you to tell me or think about, do your scores get better the more you play? And why or why not? Then, uh, basically comparing the ages of you and the person you asked to play the game. Does age seem to affect how good you are at memorizing faces? And lastly, since I asked you to play a game about memorizing faces, I want you to think about uh, are there any differences that you think there might be between memorizing faces versus memorizing other things like lists of words? If you want to keep thinking, you can pause the video right here. Otherwise, you can keep going. We're going to look at the 3 main stages of memory. To start off, we're going to have sensory memory. So when we first perceive something, whether it be through looking at it or feeling something, we're going to store that memory briefly for a fraction of a second. After that sensory information is going to be transferred to short-term memory. short-term memory is limited in capacity, which means that it can hold a lot and it can hold that stuff for a long time. So, for example, if you're memorizing someone's phone number, you can potentially store the digits in your short-term memory for 20 to 30 seconds, and then you can retrieve from there. But otherwise, the information in short-term memory is not permanent, and in order to keep it for a long time, you need to transfer it to long-term memory. But not all the information from short-term memory is transferred to long-term memory. There's also a lot of information that is simply forgotten. So long-term memory is unlimited in capacity, as in you can hold basically as much as you want. But the thing with long-term memory is you have to basically retrieve it in order to remember it. So it's not like everything in our memories are always at the top of our minds. We have to basically think back and retrieve information from our long-term memory in order to use it. And because of that, the more we retrieve some specific information, the more easy it is to retrieve it the next time. That's why when it comes to studying for tests, quizzing yourself is a lot better than simply reading notes over and over again. Because when you're quizzing yourself, you're essentially practicing retrieving the information in your mind. Another good word that you should know is consolidation, which is basically the process of having short term memory go into long term memory. A good thing to know is that sleeping is super important for consolidation. So if you're trying to study for a test, don't just simply stay up and cram for it. You need a lot of sleep in order to retain that information and keep it in your long term memory.
For this next activity, you're going to need three different things. First off, I want you to take out your handouts and find the page that has the number 5 in the top left corner. You're also going to need something to write with. And lastly, you're going to need a timer, whether that be a phone app or a website, just anything you can time yourself with. Right now, I want you to pause the video and follow the instructions on the screen. Let's see how well you memorize those words. On your sheet labeled number 5, you should see two boxes. Right now, you're only going to be using the one on the top. So again, set your timer for 2 minutes, and this time, you're going to write down as many words in the first box as you can. When your timer is up, put your pencils down and unpause the video. You can pause the video right now. You're going to be repeating the same activity, but with a different list this time. So right now, pause the video and follow the instructions on the screen again. Do you think you did better than the first time? If your timer is ready, you can pause the video right now. So here are the two lists again. Right now, I want you to check your work and count how many words you got correctly out of 25 for each of the lists. And you can write those two numbers somewhere, maybe under each box or right next to it, just so that you can remember. You can pause the video, and after you're done checking, unpause it again. If I can take a guess, I'd guess that your score for the second list is probably higher than your score for the first list. And if that's not the case, let's just say for most people, they do memorize the second list a lot better than the first. Let's take a closer look at the two lists. For the first one, let's just see what the first few words are. We have 9, swap, sell, ring,
and rust.
They have no relation with each other at all. It's just a bunch of random words. Now, if we look at the second list, the first row is horse, cat, dog, fish, and bird. What are they? They're all animals, right? and the second row is all colors, and so on. This is what we call clustering. When we put a bunch of words together that have some kind of relation, it's easier for us to remember. Here's an example of why clustering things helps us memorize it better. Let's take a look at the words horse and cat from the second list. Perhaps when you were first memorizing the list, you memorized the word horse very well, but not the word cat. When we go back to recall the words in the list, since the word horse and cat are both animals, they have some kind of connection to each other. So if we trigger the word horse in our brain, even if the word cat is very weak in our memory, it also basically triggers the word cat to some degree as well, which helps us memorize the word cat better. In neuroscience, this is what we call neural networks, in which there's different weights or connections between things in our brain. In clustering, we take advantage of the system to memorize better. When you were memorizing the list, since every word was somehow related to school, this idea of school was strongly activated in your brain. When you looked on your paper and you saw the word book, since book is also associated with school, the word book was triggered and you were falsely led to think that it was in the original list. You now learned how easy it is for our minds to be tricked. This actually has a lot of more serious implications in our real lives. Like, for example, in court, if someone's giving eyewitness testimony and they say and actually believe that something happened, there's a chance that it's actually a false memory. So we have to be really, really careful. Now's your chance to perform the same test on someone else. You can follow the instructions on the screen to create two lists like the ones I gave you. When you come up with your lists, you can first write them down on the handout, and then afterwards you can copy them down on two separate sheets of paper. Then you can give it to someone to see if they fall for the trick. To recap what we've learned so far, we started off by looking at the process in which humans see the outside world. We saw how when the brain processes information, it can sometimes change it up, which causes us to see things like optical illusions. Then, we explored how attention is selective and limited, which means that we can't always sense everything around us. We have to specifically pay attention to things in order to perceive them. Lastly, we learned about how human memory works and how things like neural networks can affect our memory. Although we've only been talking about humans so far, animals use their minds in ways both similar and different to us. For example, birds need to have good memory. In order to find the correct place to migrate, they need to memorize which direction to go. If they can't do this, then they'd be left to die in the cold. Now it's time for you to learn about animals yourself. Right now, I want you to find the page of your handout with the number 7 in the top right corner. On this page, you should see a large table with 5 rows. I already filled out the first row for you with the example with birds and migration. Now, I want you to come up with 4 other examples about how animals use either their perception, attention, or memory in order to survive. In the first column, you should write the name of the animal. In the second column, you should write whether it pertains to perception, attention, or memory. And in the third column, I want you to write a short description about how the animal uses that specific technique in order to survive. If you already have some ideas at the top of your mind, you can write them down. But if you don't, you can visit nationalgeographic.com/animal/facts-pictures to find many different animals to explore. If you know another good website to explore animals on, you can also use that. You should pause the video right here and resume it when you're done researching. What are some of the examples that you came up with? For me, one that immediately popped into my head was bats and perception.
Although bats are like humans in the sense that they can see normally using their eyes during the day, at night, in the dark when they can't use their eyes, they have another way to do so. By bouncing sound waves off the wall and sensing the vibrations coming back, they can track where they're going. This is called echolocation. Another example I came up with was eagles and attention. Eagles have eyes that can see 8 times farther than humans. Because of this, they have very keen attention. When it comes to tracking down prey like rabbits, they can really quickly find out where their prey is and immediately go catch them before their prey can notice. So after learning so much, I want us to do a little wrap-up activity to basically conclude this module. So right now I want you to take out the last page of your handout. That should be the one with the number 8 and the title Moving Forward. And on this sheet, I have put a big table in the center. On the top half, I want you to basically think back to everything you've learned today, and I want you to jot down the 3 most important facts that you learned today. After that, on the bottom half of the table, I want you to write down 3 ways that you think you're going to use what you learned today in the future. So if you can't think of anything, some ideas are maybe some ways in which you're going to improve your grades on a test, or maybe just like how you're going to improve your life in general using what you learned. You can pause the video here, and after you're done with the table, you can unpause. I want to thank you so much for taking your time to go through this module. Again, if you liked what you learned, you can check out CMU Gelfand's website for more interesting content like this. Bye bye.